So, hello and welcome to the next episode of the Self Development with Tactics podcast. And today, as you may or may not see, we are going to discuss, Decisive by Chip and Dan Heath, or Heath, and you can't really see it now, but maybe like this. It's Heath. And this is a book about how to make decisions and how to get the best decisions you want, or possibly. And to be honest, I've a little bit problems with my recording settings because everything seems, it's quite good now. But the thing is, it takes up now about 20% of my CPU, which is quite a lot, Let's see. Yeah, it's taking quite a lot of it. But we'll go through this anyways, and I think that the quality is good enough, or maybe even a little bit better. I've tweaked a little bit around, and I will see in the next few recording sessions if everything is fine or everything is working out as I wanted to. But enough talking, we will get right into it. So the 5 big ideas from this book, and by the way, this is an article by the SamuelThomasDavis.com website, as you can see on the top here, and they have just a lot of great book summaries, and they are quite detailed, and they make a very, very, very good job. But anyways, the 5 big ideas from this book are: the 4 villains of decision making are narrow framing, confirmation bias, short-term emotion, and overconfidence. And the second point is: avoid whether or not decisions. Instead, consider several options simultaneously. The third one: ask yourself who else is struggling with a similar problem and what can I learn from them. And the fourth one: when gathering good information, reality testing your ideas, go talk to an expert, which is always a good idea if you do not really want to, figure it out yourself, or if it takes up too much time. And this reminds me on something I've read, maybe, I'm not really sure, either in How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, or Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, yeah. They or he, it doesn't matter, he was talking about Ford, so Henry Ford, the automaker. Was it Henry Ford? Because there's an actor as well. I always, struggle with these two. But he was a very intelligent person, because he surrounded himself with people who are really good in their areas of doing, and he wasn't able to do shit, and so he did it. So instead of learning everything, which would have taken up a lot of time, he just surrounded himself with people who already know these stuffs, what he needs, and so he paid them, and everything worked out fine. Today it might be called outsourcing, just giving your work somebody else, a freelancer maybe, so that you do not have to do it or learn it or figure it out how it works. Just a little insight of what I think. And the fifth one, rather than choose all or nothing, choose a little something. Yes, this is true. It's always good to have something rather than nothing, or everything, if possible, is of course the best. But if it is, or the chance is not the biggest one, just the little something is just great. But let's see what the actual summary itself says. According to psychologist Daniel Kahneman, we are quick to jump to conclusions because we give too much weight to the information that's right in front of us while failing to consider the information that's just off stage. He called this tendency "what you see is all there is," and this is also known as the spotlight effect. And I already know what they are talking about. Maybe a little bit later I can, talk about my point of this. But what's in the spotlight will rarely be everything we need to make a good decision, but we won't always remember to shift the light. Sometimes, in fact, we'll forget there is a spotlight at all, dwelling so long in a tiny circle of light that we forget there is a broader landscape beyond it. And I'm sorry, but I've just have to look at the settings. Yes, if everything is okay. Because then I was just a little bit figuring out if, 1080p, which is not full HD, but HD, and or full HD, which would be 1920 by 1080, is better. And I've seen that 1080 is just total shit. And so I thought about not wasting this whole recording because of some dumb failure made. But the pros and cons approach to decision making is profoundly flawed. If we aspire to make better choices, we must learn how the four villains of decision making work and how to fight them. And the four villains, as I was talking about, or was the first point they pointed out, is or are narrow framing, confirmation bias, short-term emotion, and overconfidence. Yeah. And I have to see that my microphone is as near to my face as possible so that it does not pick up the sound my laptop is making, because this will ruin the whole recording, or not ruin, but it may not sound as good as it could. But let's see what they're talking about in the first chapter, the four villains of decision making. Narrow framing, the first villain of decision making, refers to our tendency to define our choices too narrowly, to see them in binary terms, which is, we tend to develop a quick belief about a situation and then seek out information that bolster our belief. This is called the confirmation bias. And this is the second villain of decision making. When people have the opportunity to collect information from the world, they are more likely to select information that supports their pre-existing attitudes, beliefs, and actions, which is true. And I've also read it already. I don't know. Maybe I've just read this article before. It just happened to me, I think, the last episode, which was a little bit funny afterwards. But it's also a pity because, if you just do things that contribute your beliefs and attitudes and actions you already have or do, you will never get out of your rat race. There's just this circle and you do it all the time and you will not get further and further, which I hope, as I read it now, I'm not doing. But let's go ahead. According to Professor Don Lovallo, confirmation bias is probably the single biggest problem in business because even the most sophisticated people get it wrong. People go out and they are collecting the data and they don't realize that they are cooking the books. When we want something to be true, we will spotlight the things that support it, and then when we draw conclusions from these or those spotlighted scenes, we'll congratulate ourselves on recent decisions. Which I have to really keep attention to this, and maybe I can see it when other people are making decisions or I'm actually making decisions. And that's something I really like about these books and also these book summaries, because in terms of the book summaries, you get a really quick insight into the book and also can see if it's worth reading it. And you get some or a lot of information out of these summaries. And in terms of the books, there is something you can really use to take action in your life right now, actually. But let's see. The third villain of decision making is short-term emotion. The fourth villain of decision making is overconfidence. And I think the third, so short-term decisions, is actually pretty clear, and so they won't go through it. So I think if you're just bad-mooded, you will make, different decisions if you're good-mooded. But the fourth one is overconfidence. We think we know more than we do about how the future will unfold. We have too much confidence in our own predictions. When we make guesses about the future, we shine our spotlights on information that's close at hand. And then we draw conclusions from that information. The future has an uncanny ability to surprise. We can't shine a spotlight on areas we don't know they exist, which is totally true. And I have to read this one again. We have too much confidence in our own predictions. When we make guesses about the future, we shine our spotlights on information that's close at hand, and then we draw a conclusion from that information. So if you think about normal decision process, it usually proceeds in 4 steps. You encounter a choice, you analyze your options, you make a choice, and then you live with it. The problem though is that there is a villain that afflicts each of these stages. You encounter a choice, but never framing makes you miss options. That's true, because you only see things you want to see or things you see, and all the other things, because the frame would be much bigger than it is actually, you might see a lot more options. You analyze your options, but the confirmation bias leads you to gather self-serving information. And because, you have a really small frame, and you just pick all these things in the frame that contributes your own thinking, you just get, the tunnel gets even smaller all the way down to the end of the decision-making process. And then you make a choice, but short-term emotion will often tempt you to make the wrong one. Then you live with it, but you'll often be overconfident about how the future will unfold. We can't deactivate our biases, but we can counteract them with the right discipline. The MNEMONEC, or the Mnemonic Rap, or WRRP, which I think, so MNEMONIC is just a word I can't pronounce, and rap is it an acronym? I don't know. It just stands for 1, 2, 3, 4 for several or words. Captures the 4 indications needed to protect you from the above biases. Widen your opt-ins, I think it's called options. Reality test your assumptions. Attain distance before deciding, and prepare to be wrong. Sometimes the hardest part of making a good decision is knowing there's one to be made. Yes, that's true, because if you just have the force and have the pressure on you that you actually have to make a decision, it's just really, really, really bad, and I really don't like it. Sorry. I'm very sorry for that one. But let's see what they talk about in the second chapter, and I really like this book, and I really liked this episode today, and I think that I'm actually going to put out two episodes every day now, because I have my holidays around 2 weeks actually, which is pretty long for me and for my school, but it's a lot of fun as well, and I think it contributes my life, and it contributes someone else in here. So you who are watching this. And I just now see that I think the camera is not very synchronized with me speaking. And I hope it's not the best or the worst for you, or it doesn't, fuck you up or something. I don't know. So chapter 2, a wide and narrow frame. When Fishoff began to categorize teenagers' decisions, he found that the most common type was one that lacked any choice at all. It was what he called a statement of resolve. An example would be, I'm going to stop blaming others. So I have to read it again, I'm sorry. When Fishoff began to categorize teenagers' decisions, he found that the most common type was one that lacked any choice at all. It was what he called a statement of resolve. An example would be, I am going to stop blaming others. Oh, I see. So there's actually really no choice. Either you do it or you don't do it. So actually there is some kind of choice behind it. A 1993 study by Paul Nutt, which analyzed 168 decisions, found of the teams he studied, only 29% considered more than one alternative. So having more alternatives seems to be better than having, less, which is some kind of logic, but I don't know. Nutt found that whether or not decisions failed 52% of the time over the long term versus only 32% of the decisions with 2 or more alternatives. And we're going through this one as well, and then sadly enough I have to go because we are going to eat something, actually. Why do whether or not decisions fail more often? Nutt argues that when a manager pursues a single option, she spends most of her time asking, how can I make this work? How can I get my colleagues or colleagues behind me? Meanwhile, other vital questions get neglected. Is there a better way? And what else could we do? And so for this, I have to say goodbye. And this is actually, I think, the shortest episode I've ever made. But today there will be another one because this article is just great because there's so much into it, even though it's quite hard to understand for me. But I hope you have a very nice day, and I'll see you the next time. Love you.